Hi everyone, it's time for another video, and this week we're talking about Walsh's book, chapters 4, 5, and 7. And she starts off talking about shock absorbers, and we've talked about a lot of this stuff is repetition. Like I've said before, Boss and Walsh say the same things just in different ways, but she talks about shock absorbers and for families, and when a family's in crisis, they need to have some kind of um, shock absorber, for lack of a better word, to help them bounce back. And so, if a family has certain tools that they can use when they're in crisis, then that helps them rebound from stress from a crisis. And she talks about flexibility, connectedness, and social and economic resources. Of course, flexibility is really important. You know, when you find yourself in stress, in a stressful situation, sometimes you have to think outside the box and be willing to make some changes in order to be able to bounce back from this particular crisis. And then, of course, connectedness. It's so important for us to stay connected with each other as a family, friends, community, church, things like that, because that is definitely going to help families be able to be resilient. And of course, social and economic resources are important. And again, like I said before, um, money helps. It does help to be able to have the money to get the things that you need and to get the help that you need, but not everybody has that. So then we have to really draw on our social resources, friends, family, churches, things like that, to be able to, help us stay stable and be resilient. I had a young couple come in to see me for therapy the other day, and very young couple with an 8-month-old baby, and the wife is going to school full time, and the husband's trying to get a web-based business started, and of course they're both trying to help with the baby, and she's trying to study, and he's trying to do this and business, and they're so stressed out, and they're just almost at the end of their rope, physically, emotionally, everything, because they're just exhausted and so stressed out. And I just kept saying to them, your foundation is rocky right now, and how are we going to rebuild the foundation? It doesn't look like, or not rebuild it, but they have a good foundation, but stabilize it. There's not a lot they can do right now to change the situation that they're in. So rather than trying to, look for solutions in that way, I'm trying to help them find ways to strengthen their foundation, which is being more connected with each other, taking time every day to talk to each other, to have those moments to share, and also to reach out to others. I said, okay, you don't have money to pay a babysitter, but is there some way your baby now is, soon going to be old enough to be able to notice other kids and interact and things, maybe not for 6 months or so, but, start trading with people, somebody else, who has a baby, can y'all trade off so that you each can have time out, each of the couples. And so, trying to find ways to help them be resilient and to strengthen their foundation, because I feel like they're pulling apart from each other rather than coming together, which is really important in a time of stress or crisis. So that's just an example that I thought of. Sometimes, I know y'all have all heard of the term homeostasis, where family homeostasis, where things are the same and people get in a routine. And then when things come along, a crisis or a stressful situation that disrupts the homeostasis, then the family is shaky for a while, and then it just reorganizes naturally. And what Walsh is suggesting is that oftentimes, when the family is disrupted and the stability is shaken, that the family, when it reorganizes, can reorganize in a positive way. A lot of times, you hear this sometimes when people go through a really tough time. Cancer, for instance. I have a good friend who had not good cancer in his throat, and he said that was when he began to really live and to be the person who he really thinks he was meant to be after he had a scare like that. So for him and for his family, it strengthened them. Now, I know that doesn't always happen. A lot of times families are torn apart when there's an illness, particularly of a young child in a family. Very often the couples don't stay together if it's a long-term illness or a death. Rather than coming together and strengthening their foundation, it's shaken their foundation at the core, and they just can't keep it together. So if somebody's in a situation like that, if they reach out for help, very often we as family professionals can help them work through that and try to give them tools to build on the foundation they have and strengthen so that they are can stay together and survive this crisis. And she talks about too. Well, back on that, I studied when I was in my master's program, got interested in the chaos theory. And while chaos is a scientific, well, we're in sciences, but a hard science term, chaos theory, it's really what happens in the world. Our lives get turned upside down sometimes, and it seems chaotic, but we reorganize, and that's what happens in the universe too. When something gets shaken up, it reorganizes just naturally. And so I thought about that. I had years ago when my younger daughter was in school in second grade, and they sent out these papers of rules, these rules, that rule, this is what you do. If you do this, you get in trouble. If you do that, you get your name marked. You get a unhappy frowny face or whatever. And so I got so upset because I went and talked to the principal and her teacher, and I said, rules, there's just so many rules, and give kids a rule and they're going to figure out a way to break it. Like, can we just have a little bit more freedom and not so many rules? And they said, oh, well, if we don't have rules, we'll have chaos. And I said, well, you think you would, and you might for a little while, but then they'd figure it out. They'd figure out how to get along with each other. Probably sooner than later, because that's just the way systems organize, and they didn't trust it, and obviously nobody made any changes, and there's still tons of rules in schools. But that was just one of my soapboxes I got on. um, Walsh talks about having a strong leader, and I know, in different cultures, the matriarch, the mother, is usually the leader in the family, and in some cultures, the father is the leader in the family. But even I'd say, back in the time I grew up in the 50s and 60s, it was considered the men were the head of the household, and I know that's still true to a certain extent. But I think my father thought he was the head of the household, but I think my mother actually still was. So anyway, but a strong leader, and very often it is the mother who keeps the family together, who's the strength of the family, who holds who's the glue that holds the family together. And but there needs to be somebody like that to kind of the term I use is hold the space for the family to work through whatever it's going through. And when there's not a strong leader um, in the group, and sometimes it's an older sibling, then things seem to be more chaotic. And so it's really important, as Walsh says, to have that strong leader. And she talks about communication. I've mentioned that before. It's very, very important to have strong, clear communication with each other and talk about things, not keep secrets. Another story I have, when this was 40-something years ago, but my aunt, my mother's sister, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And they decided, my grandmother was older at the time, and they decided that she didn't need to be told that my aunt was dying. And my aunt lived 3 years after her diagnosis, and my grandmother had to have known that she was sick, because she just kept, well, she knew she was sick, but she didn't know necessarily that she was dying. But I think she had to know on some level. But my mother and her sister thought that it was best for her not to, because she was a worrier and all that. Well, it's like, well, but not knowing, I mean, she had to know on some level. And so then she worried more, maybe, because she didn't know what was really going on. And so it's really, really important and I'm not making my mother and her sister wrong for that. They did the best they could. They made the best choice that they could at the time. But I think I would choose to do it differently. In Chapter 7, Walsh talks about community-based services. And when y'all do your brochures for community-based service, this is what she's talking about is, used to, back in the day, I hate to always talk about the way it used to be, but things have changed. Our society has changed. And back 30, 40 years ago, or even 20 years ago, families were more closer together physically. And now, because of jobs and the economy and things, people have moved all over the country, sometimes all over the world. And so they're not as close to their families of origin as they used to be. And so they have to reach out to other people. We're used to, if a young mother, was divorced or something and she couldn't feed her children, rather than going to social services, she'd go turn to a family member. And that's not always available today. And I mean, I guess it hasn't, there have been times for certain people that it wasn't available, but it seems like more and more we're seeing that where people aren't able to take care of themselves, and so they reach out to social services, and thank goodness those community services are there. Some of it's government based and some of it's nonprofit, some churches, things like that. But all these services are really, really fundamental, really important to help families stay resilient and to bounce back. That's sometimes the stability, reaching out to somebody, a social service person, a community based or church based organization is the only family some people have, or the only stability that they have. And so it's really, really important that people have those resources and know that they're there. That's why you're doing the brochure, so that you can become more aware of the community based organization, so you can pass that information on to your clients. One thing that she threw in at the end of this chapter, and I'm not sure exactly how it fits in, but she talks about the therapist connection. But I know that not all y'all are going to be therapists, but y'all are family science type professionals, and so there may be some OT. Now, I don't know if there are OT people in here, but I usually have OT people. Maybe that's an undergrad, but the family sciences people, and so you'll be working with families, and you'll hear these stories, tragic stories of crisis and things. And when we hear these things over and over again every day, it starts eating at us. I mean, we obviously are caring people, otherwise we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. But they have a thing called compassion fatigue, where we are, just share so much compassion for so long, and then we just, we have to take care of ourselves. And so we have to reach out to others for support, and to find a support group, or the people you work with that you can bounce things off of. It's always really, really good to debrief with your people you work with, and and self-care is so very, very important. So I guess that's about it. I've talked as fast as I can, and this is a long video, so I apologize. I had a lot to say. All right, y'all take care, and we'll see you again. Bye.